Now, it's known as toponymy, the study of place names, and there's quite a flurry of interest at the moment in street names and how few of them are named after women. It's reckoned 30% of streets are named after men and only 3% are female. A campaign to name more of them after women began in Italy a year ago, and it's spreading. A Labour councillor in Wales, Jessica Powell, is pressing her council to name more new streets after women. Well, Jeff Bird went to one of the few streets in Manchester that fit the bill, Elizabeth Slinger Road in West Didsbury.
OK, well, here I am in South Manchester on that rarest of things, a street named after a woman. Elizabeth Slinger Road, to be precise. The question is, who was she? I'm trying to find somebody who can fill me in on the details of Elizabeth's past. Do you know why it's called that?
I haven't the foggiest.
It's named after a woman. There aren't many streets that are named after women.
They've got Emmeline Pankhurst Centre.
On Nelson Street.
Nelson Street. So the Pankhurst house is on a street named after a man. Blimey.
Street, yeah.
Any underrepresentation of women in any area is not so good.
So a few more women on the street signs, you think?
Yeah, definitely. Inspiring women, yeah. It encouraged people to find out the history of the name of the person.
So this afternoon you're going to find out who Elizabeth Slinger was?
I'm going to Google her as soon as I get home.
Where are you from?
Cambridgeshire, originally.
Where are you from?
Peterborough.
So can you think of any women who've had streets named after them in your neck of the woods?
You're That's a good question, really. No,
You look quite surprised.
I am surprised. To be honest, though, I have no real idea of many streets that are named after many people.
Albert Street, Charles Street,
Okay, maybe some really famous people.
Matt Busby Way,
Yeah, okay.
Alan Turing Way.
So what we're getting at here is that I don't know any famous women.
And I think it is a shame that maybe women aren't credited in the same way that men are.
If you had the chance to name a street after anybody, who would it be?
My mum,
Your mum?
Yeah.
So what would it be called?
Marion Lomas Way. She's a great woman.
Well, the investigation into who Elizabeth Slinger was isn't going so well. I'm going to nip into this school here, Lancasterian School, and see if I can get any answers here. Right, well, I've been guided into an office off the main corridor, and I've been joined by... tell me your names, please.
I'm Dave Calvert. I'm the executive head of Lancasterian.
And I'm Bethan Glenn, and I'm one of the teachers here.
Well, the school is for children with physical, medical and complex medical needs.
Elizabeth Slinger became the head teacher here at Lancasterian in 1944. We have a newspaper article here from the Manchester Evening News, and it talks about where miracles happen and the kind of level of support and equipment that the students had at those times must have been quite far-reaching and modern for its day. So I think she was a fairly inspirational character.
How would you feel about giving a street named after you, either of you?
Unlikely to happen, but...
What's your full name?
Dave Calvert.
Dave Calvert Close. That's got to work, hasn't it? What about you?
Bethan Cul-de-sac. Yeah.
Bethan Cul-de-sac.
Well, earlier this morning I spoke to Jonathan Schofield, who's a writer and historian who runs city tour guides in Manchester, and Claudia Antolini, who's been campaigning in Italy. How did it begin?
The campaign for Toponomastica femminile began 1 year ago from an idea of some female students of the founder of this group, Maria Piercolini, that going around in Rome noticed that there were no women for the street names. So they thought, well, why can't we be there as well?
So what exactly are you asking for? Are you asking for complete equality, that there should be 50-50 male and female?
Well, actually, no, this is not the main point, because this is the result of some kind of culture that was alive until the beginning of the 20th century. So women did not have the same access to culture and to politics. So it is quite normal that until a certain time there were more men than women that deserved to be remembered. What we're asking for is that the excellent figures of women from the past are remembered as well as men. And now that we are approaching to be completely equal in our opportunities with men, that from now on there is a bigger attention to the memory.
Jonathan, how do streets in this country come to be named?
It's very simple. It's the local authority. The local authority will adjudicate through planning applications and planning processes what the names should be, but they don't have to suggest the names. Anybody, literally anybody, can suggest the names. So if we're talking about names in Manchester, if we did a new development, say, near the old marketplace, we could call it Elizabeth Raffald Square or something, who was a multiple entrepreneur, wrote cookbooks back in the 18th century. And it just simply has to go before people, and if they say, yep, that's fine, it will happen. It's as simple as that.
So what historically has determined the names?
It's very interesting. I think possibly it's different from Italy. In Britain, good old Britain, the Anglo-Saxon tradition and all that, it's all about property to a certain degree. So if you look through most of the cities in Britain, you will have names of streets which are really named after families rather than men, although, of course, it would be the men probably selling the property. So all the northern quarter of Manchester, which is Newton Street, Lever Street, Stevenson Square, they're named after the property owners who donated the land or gave the land or developed the land. So very rarely do we have a hero culture of street naming in Britain.
Why do you suppose Manchester has no Pankhurst or Gaskell Street? Because both, well, all of them, I mean, because the Pankhursts were the whole family, they all had connections with Manchester.
Well, that's just a historical ridiculousness, isn't it? I think often what happens is that street names are given by men in the past, those old men in big coats in the past, for each other. So they often honour each other if they are going to give themselves street names. And if you think about it, the votes for women started being resolved in 1918, and Manchester was a centre, obviously, for the female suffrage movement. So really, for many people, up until that period and a little bit afterwards, it would have been controversial, possibly. And so Britain's Britain, isn't it? So we steer clear of controversy in all our street names, in any other things. It took ages for the Beatles to be recognised as something good for Liverpool, because the aldermen were worried about drug taking and things like that. So, no, it's just Victorian gentlemen favouring other Victorian gentlemen.
Claudia, what famous women do have streets named after them in Italy?
Well, in Italy we have a lot of exponents from the Catholic religion. We have a lot of streets dedicated to saints or to the Virgin. So this is like the half of the streets that we find dedicated to women are dedicated to religious figures.
Jonathan, there is a street in Manchester called Anita Street, which I think most people think is named for a woman, but it's not, is it?
Well, there's a street in the Ancoats area of Manchester called Anita Street, and you think, oh, that's sweet, isn't that nice? Who was this Anita lady? And it turns out that the street was initially built and was named in one of these local authority things I mentioned after the Manchester and Salford Sanitary Association. So it was Sanitary Street. Now, lots of the locals after a while didn't really like the connotations, maybe, of the word sanitary. So in a very pragmatic resolution of this street naming problem, they got rid of the R and Y of sanitary, got rid of the S at the beginning, and came up with Anita Street. So it's a neat reason for Anita Street.
Claudia, how much progress has your campaign made?
Well, from the beginning of last year, we had around 100 of streets in different municipalities that were named after women.
And which Italian women are you campaigning for at the moment?
At the moment, we are campaigning for Rita Levi-Montalcini, the Nobel Prize scientist that died recently. And so we're writing to all the cities in Italy to suggest her memory being brought forward also in the future.
And Jonathan, which women do you think have really been unfairly overlooked in this country?
Do you know what? I don't think it's almost that issue in this country. I don't think it's ever been done that way. I think what we find with women as well is that recently, in some sort of readjustment, you are getting buildings, for example, more than streets named after women. There was a very famous Manchester politician, Ellen Wilkinson, for example, who went into the Labour cabinet with Clement Attlee after World War II, and she's now got Ellen Wilkinson School named after her. So I think institutions are being named, but certainly in the Manchester context, you would have to go for the Pankhursts at some point, because they're perfect for this conversation in a way, because they were fighting for the right for women to have the vote. And it wasn't just one Pankhurst either, it was the daughters of Emmeline Pankhurst. So you would have to go for her. And I don't know, has Grantham got a Margaret Thatcher Street? Well, you never know. You never know. I think it's probably more sensible in a local situation where you have streets named after places. I think it's absolutely hilarious, for example, that in Derby there's a Lara Croft Way. which is named after the fictional computer game character, because that's where the idea was dreamed up for Lara Croft.
And what's your favourite street name of all time?
Well, if it's not about women or men or anything like that, then there is a lovely little street in Milnrow, which is a small area on the moors near Rochdale, and it's Uncouth Lane.
Do we know how it got its uncouth name?
Literally, it was an horrible, ugly lane up a muddy path up the moors, and it's just great. And there are people who live on Uncouth Lane, so...
Jonathan Schofield and Claudia Antolini, thank you both very much indeed.